Okay, so once you have your color wheel mapped out and everything's erased and clean, we're going to go ahead and start painting with our gouache paints, and we're also going to be using white. This is going to be the tints that we'll be working with, so you'll have all of your prismatic colors going around the sides here, and then all we're going to do is add white to them, so we'll have all of the colors, add a little bit of white, do that there, add more white, do that there. So to start this off, I like to start with yellow, so I'm gonna have this upside down while I'm working on it, and I'm just gonna put these other colors off to the side here. For now, I have my palette, and off camera here I have paper towels so I can frequently clean my brushes, and I just have some random brushes here that I had in my stash. And then I'll have my water. I'm going to also have it off camera. I like to put tape on the bottom of my lid and then place the water into the lid so that way that way I'm less likely to drop it. I'm really clumsy and pretty bad about bumping things, so that's something that could also help. You can choose to use tape to help you whenever you are coloring these in, so that way it's a little neater. I'm going to try to attempt it without using tape. It's your preference though. We'll see how it goes for me, and if it's going terrible then I'll bust out the tape. So if you'll notice, I have like my palette paper kind of double layered. I do not want it leaking through at all on my paper that I'm working on. I mean, better safe than sorry. You can use just a paper plate, an old plate, whatever you have on you handy. Another thing that I'm doing here is I also just have some paper. You can just use a full sheet of Bristol paper. I'm just using these small cutouts of Bristol paper so that way they're not covering up too much of my surface here, since I do have a small workspace on my desk. So I put out some of the primary yellow, which is kind of more of a greenish yellow. And I'm also just going to put out some of the white. And you'll notice how we did half our yellow into two little areas. So rather than one yellow, we'll be working with two. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark this out. So we'll now have, yeah, I cannot write upside down. I'm just going to write this out as primary yellow and deep yellow. So I like to go ahead and try to get some water down. I dip my yellow in and then I mix it. Make sure it's pretty wellly mixed to prevent streaking. There we go, and now I'm just going to take some over here, add some white to it. You want to try to make sure that it's not gonna like have streaks of yellow and streaks of white, so try to get it pretty welly mixed. Okay. Now I'm just gonna add more white. And I like to kind of separate some off there in case I decide to do another quick layer. But I'm going to add more white. Okay. Okay, so I think that's a pretty solid change, right? I'm just going to give the yellow another quick once over, just the primary. Because I hate that whenever you have pencil marks that you didn't erase well, and they're always going to show up on the yellow. And this is why I also like to start out with yellow, because it's going to be the lightest of the colors that we're working with here. So if there's some built up in our brush, it's not going to make too much of a change with our other colors. And actually, whenever I switch to a darker colors, I like to just go ahead and switch out my brush, but that's up to you. So there we go. And now I like to work around this clockwise, so that way we're going from yellow to orange, red, violet, blue, then green. But you can approach it another way if you like. This is just the way that I'm doing it and the way I'm doing in this video, and how I suggest just working lighter color to darker color. So now I'm just going to take out some of the deep yellow, and I'm actually going to put out a little bit more. Like, I didn't even really need that much of the primary yellow, but okay, so taking out some water. Once you have all the clumps out of it, you can go ahead and start. Okay, so next I'm just going to squeeze out some of my scarlet red. And I have some fresh water over here on the side. Okay, I'm not sure when that stopped recording, but I'm gonna go ahead and move on to my true orange now, which should be a perfect balance of your scarlet red and your deep yellow. And my deep yellow is gone now, so I'm just gonna add some of this scarlet into my yellow orange. And as you're mixing this, it doesn't have to necessarily be a perfect 50-50 of the deep yellow and the scarlet, because some of the pigments in some paints are stronger than other pigments. So all you're looking for is for it to just be a pretty solid, true version of itself. So now I'm just going to add more of this red to my orange red here. I'm gonna move on to my red, true red, my scarlet that I already have poured out there. got a little too watery on me there, so I'm just going to add in some more paint. So really all I did here was I just used whatever of that color was in the brush, and I just added some white and mixed it in, and it came out. I'm gonna add more white. Okay, so now I'm just gonna go in with my magenta. The other color that's more of like a, you know, leaning towards purple that we used before was called alizarin crimson. So they're two really different colors, but generally in color wheels they can act the same. Magenta's all right. I got nothing against her. So the nice thing about gouache is it can kind of be reactivated, not fully, but kind of. So it can kind of start to blend in with whatever color you begin to put over it. So like this guy here, it's also pretty opaque for the most part. So that little dab of a darker pink that I just put down is just completely engulfed now in the lighter color. And nobody ever knows that it was there. Okay, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm coming back to that. I'm not happy with that. I'm gonna come back to it after I clean out my water. Okay, so now I'm gonna move on to my violet colors. So the two blues that we have here are primary cyan and ultramarine. So I'm gonna put ultramarine here next to my violet blues because it's gonna be closer to like an indigo color. And then my cyan is to this side because it's gonna be a little bit closer to green. Alright, so I'm just gonna take out some of my ultramarine here. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys a little bit of a different way to approach this if you feel it's easier this other way. And now I'm just going to take some of that ultramarine, mix it in. And that should make pretty good violet color. I'm just gonna test. Okay, so yeah, I can get it to be a little bit closer to the magenta, and then I can also get it to be a deeper violet. So you gotta make sure that you have plenty of the violet mixed up. I mixed a pretty solid color that's between the two here. So now I'm just going to go ahead and throw it into my violet area. Okay, so now rather than going this way, I'm gonna kind of go outwards. So I mixed up a good amount of the violet here, so I'm just gonna put some aside. Now I'm going to take some of my magenta, since I still need to make this violet red color. And I'm just going to mix magenta in it with some water, make sure it's well incorporated. Okay, and I think that's pretty close. Now I'm just going to do my violet red. So now with this other half of my violet, I'm just going to put more of my ultramarine in there. So now I end up with like a really dark purple, or dark violet, excuse me. And yeah, so all I did here was make the violet, then I added some magenta to fill in that pie slice. Now I'm just adding more ultramarine to fill in this slice here. Okay, so all I did off screen here was I just filled in my ultramarine. Ooh. The ultramarine slice and the cyan slice. Actually, I'm just gonna go back in and once again, like I always do, just give it another quick coat in some areas because it's looking too streaky for me. Okay, so now I'm gonna approach the secondary color green the same way I did with the violet, which I'm just gonna make a lot of one green and then put more of the primary yellow in one to get the yellow green, and then put more of my cyan blue in the other one, so I will get a bluish green. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the yellow green, and I'm just putting down some of this primary yellow. And I think that's pretty good. I'm just gonna mix it a little bit more. So there you have it. Remember, it's best to just work on it one slice at a time as you're going around. What I found easiest to do was to go ahead and mix the secondary colors, so you can mix the orange, violet, and green first before you go ahead and add more of one of those split primaries to it to give you that color between your split primary and your secondary color. Yeah, just remember, like as you're going around, as you're going to the center, try to kind of feel out how much white you were adding each time. I was kind of eyeballing it as I went through. You want it to generally look like a filter is going over each one in order to get a lighter color as it's going inward. Make sure that you're adding enough water to your gouache as you're working on this. Make sure that you're mixing enough of one color as you're going through. Be sure that your work has no streaks. I'm looking for streak-free color wheels here, since this is a pretty basic, easy assignment for you guys. I'm looking for these to be super neat and clean. So do make sure that you do that. Like you guys saw me doing, I would go in and I would just be adding another layer as I went on. So I would let it dry, and then I would go as I was working on the next slice. That's something that you can do to prevent the paper from pilling up a little bit and getting kind of gross. Just think back to whenever you're working with the ink, how that was reacting with the paper. You couldn't go over it a lot of times, or else the paper would start to come up as you were going. Again, you can feel free to use tape if you'd like. I chose not to and came out with a pretty okay result. I feel like I could have been a little bit neater, but I suggest that if you feel like you're a bit messy, go ahead and use the tape and just tape your way around as you go. But yeah, next up we're going to have our complementary color wheel.